My hero All's Justice is here with a full game full of a bunch of diverse different unique game modes, and one of those game modes on this game is ranked mode. And with ranked mode, of course, we do get cheese, and with these characters all having at least some type of ranged abilities except for some on the roster, we do know also with the maps being extremely large and being able to move around these maps, people like to use zoning as a tactic, and I know a lot of y'all have probably been having a little bit of trouble closing in on this, especially if you're not used to playing the old One's Justice 2 games, like myself, and I'm going to give you some tips on some things that will help you when dealing with zoners. Of course, there will be some character-specific counters, but I'm also just trying to really focus on the general counters that are going to allow you to actually work with, regardless of what character you're using. Of course, kit does come into play with certain things, but I'm going to give you some good tips that should allow you to maybe get a few more wins against some of those pesky, annoying zoners that you run to online.
Bring it on, little Suzuki. You want to see what true resolve is? I'll show you.
So when we talk about these counters, keep in mind that there's always a counter to a counter. If a good zoner, if they realize that you're starting to get used to their playstyle, they're going to switch it up and find ways to counter you trying to counter them. So keep that in mind, and they might run from you. But we first talk about the character-specific counters. There are just certain characters in this game that just work really well against different type of zoners. Now keep in mind, there are two different types of attacks. There's just the normal attacks that, just tapped and it just shoots out like one projectile. And there's also the ones that are more like beams that you see from Endeavor, and also from Shigaraki, and also from Bakgo. And those are not going to work with some of these specific characters like Mirio. He's pretty good at just closing out anybody. Nejire also nullifies projectiles, but it doesn't work against AFO Chaos for some reason. Kurogiri is also pretty good. Also Mr. Compress, because he can absorb the basic projectiles and shoot them back. It doesn't work against the charged ones, and it's the same thing with Gentle Criminal. He can put out his little zones to bounce the moves back, but it won't work against the charged projectiles. But one of the main things that you need to work on to actually counter zoners is when we talk about movement, man, the main thing you need to do with movement is making sure that you do not use too much of your stamina. I know it's very hard, you're always maybe pressing the dash button, but that stamina is going to come in handy when it comes to dashing, only when necessary to close in. And also, depending on the projectile, it's always better to try to jump up and then move forward. If you're moving left or right, you're basically just going to be leaving yourself in a just loop of trying to slowly close in. You always want to try to move forward, and most projectiles are pretty easy to dodge unless it's like a multiple shot projectile where it's basically causing you to have to time it properly. Another thing that's pretty good for dealing with zoners is rise in action. This is something that was actually put into the game, and I think specifically for dealing with zoning in certain aspects. Now there's a lot of different rising actions, but I do think the ones that work the best is probably the force drop, because depending on how close you are, you'll automatically just drop down on top of your opponent. Also, I think the speed rush is good if you pop it before they can actually get their move off, just to close in. If you pop it when they're already shooting the projectile, there is a chance you get hit with it. And one of the ones that maybe has one of the biggest rewards, but it's really hard to pull off, is the counter slide. If you can actually successfully get off the counter slide, you teleport behind your enemy and you hit them. But this one really requires really good timing, so I don't think that's the most effective one. The best way is definitely the force drop. And one of the really key ways to deal with zoners is counterattack. And these counterattacks are very specific depending on what character you're playing with. If you don't know how to use this, it's usually your right bumper, also using your top button, whether it's triangle or whatever it is that you're using on whatever console. And the travel distance varies depending on the character, and also just the amount of armor you get depends on the character you're using. So maybe a character like Tsukuyomi, he's really good because he sends out Dark Shadow to hit him from a distance. Also, Kurogiri gets a little bit of a free teleport, and Dabi has one of the best ones with him jumping forward with his counter attack. And I also just found that certain just counter moves that aren't even counter attacks, just counter quirks, work pretty well. Like with Night Eye, he can pretty much nullify all projectiles if he's on the ground using his foresight. Now it doesn't allow him close in, but he does basically get rid of all projectiles, even beams. There might be some that get through it, but it worked against Shigaraki, Endeavor, and even AFO Chaos, which was able to actually go through some barrier things, even like with Dabi's barrier, and also him going through Mina's barrier. But to wrap things up, man, all around when you're dealing with zoners, it's really good for you to try to learn the cheese and learn the movesets of certain characters to know when you have that opening to get closer and then be able to pull off that counterattack, rising action, or whatever you want to do. And I also didn't talk about in this video, there's also just a thing called projectile priority. If you have a character that has better projectile priority, or that also just gets rid of projectiles, or his moves just come out faster, this is also very good. A perfect example of this would be Night Eye and also Stain. Stain's knives come out very fast, and for the most part they do eliminate a lot of projectiles. There are some that get around it, like Dabi, because his curve around, but just testing out these characters and seeing which ones have good projectile priority or also just canceling out is very good. But I think one of the main things from this list, you definitely have to work on your movement, because nothing else matters if you're not going to be able to actually do the proper jumps and dashes in to actually pull off these counterattacks. But I hope this video helped y'all. I hope you have fun on ranked, and let me know any other things that you want me to give you some tips about how to deal with in this game, man. But hope y'all enjoyed the video, and yeah, I will see y'all in the next one.